Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
Back, and if you've just joined us, the Nafisa Tango Show is definitely creating loads of inspiration and education this afternoon. So tune in with us and get inspired by many people doing different things. And talking about that, we're going to be discussing the author of the week, who is Sister Shahista Thokan Ismail, one of the authors of Lockdown Behind the Mask. And she's going to be speaking about her contribution towards the book. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about her. Shahista is almost 40. She's a mum of 4 boys. She comes from the small town in KwaZulu-Natal, Pietermaritzburg. Her inspiration for writing came from her grandfather, who was a graduate of Dale Carnegie School for Public Speakers. COVID was her most productive year. And I think that's very interesting because I think a lot of people are turning around and saying COVID was a very difficult period for them. And it was something that was very challenging, but I think she's taken this and turned it around for the better. So let's get some inspiration from her this afternoon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you, Nafisa?
Alhamdulillah, and yourself?
I'm good, alhamdulillah.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Your story, I think, is very inspirational and I think full of messages and meanings. So a mum of 44 boys, wow, that's a lot of hard work.
Alhamdulillah. I think, yes, they've kept me young, but also quite busy. And I'm glad you enjoyed the story. It's actually taken from experiences that I've had along my journey as a marriage counselor and coach.
Yeah, and I think that's imperative. It's nice to see that you've done that, and I'll tell you why. I think a lot of the times, firstly, people find it taboo to be able to, go and talk, especially now, about their mental health situations that they're in. I think they think that, it's something abnormal, not understanding the fact that there is a situation and a circumstance at hand, and it's affecting every single one of us.
No, definitely. And I think what makes it relatable is everyone will find a little bit of themselves in that couple that I wrote about. And what we actually draw and the message from there is the imperfections that exist in individuals before we actually get married, before we actually become mothers or sisters or whatever this role that we play in the society and community is. And I think a lot of people will gain comfort in knowing that people have struggled and there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, that's so true. Now, what I found very interesting about you was that you said COVID was her most productive year. Now, I find that very inspirational because I think for a lot of us, we sit back and say, oh my word, and we hold our heads and say, we're in a situation, what do we do? And I think a lot of people just ride the ride and don't try and find, should we say, the opportunities to be able to, get them into better spaces and places. But I think this is where your story comes in. It makes people understand that you don't have to sit in the situation that you're in. You can do something about it. There is hope. There are support structures, and you can reach out. I think what was important on your story was the dilemma of relationships withstanding the COVID pandemic as couples were locked down together. And that created a lot of pressure in the environment as such.
Yeah. So let me tackle the first half of that question about productivity. As human beings, and what I've studied is people tend to base productivity on a very tangible, measurable thing. And for me, I always say there's your bread and butter and then there's your passion, which is the work that you do in your life. So when I said that COVID was my most productive year, as a coach, even though I was retrenched as an educator after 15 years, what I did was I took to the drawing board and I reinvented myself as an author, which I never thought was possible. Then I also went on an international platform to speak. So again, I found outlets for productivity, but again, not necessarily that maybe was tangible and brought me income and gave me financial security. So for me, being productive was tapping into personality traits and skills and abilities that I've never had the time to maybe focus on prior to COVID.
Yes.
So alhamdulillah, for me, that was a really good year. And then your second part where you said with the story and with the challenges that existed, what I tried to encapsulate there was that it was only, it was not only, the couple that went through financial strain during COVID, because again, everyone focused on what they've lost in COVID. But again, with the couple, it was their individuality, their own faults and their own lack of growth in their personal capacities as individuals that contributed to COVID, and then the cabin fever, and then the conflict in marriage. What we tend to do again is we look at the whole picture instead of introspecting what actually the dilemma was during COVID. Why did we struggle in certain areas of our lives? And again, it made us look back at how we were living and then change certain habits and grow from there. And I think it really was just a push, and it was a force for us to slow down and really just, again, look at how we're living and change that for the better.
That's true. I agree with you there. And I think, I always say this, and I say this, I think, every week on my show. It was about grounding ourselves and reflecting, retrospecting and reconnecting. And I think this is where, you're speaking about relationships. I think the reconnection was what we needed to do during this period. Because if you look at our daily lives and the types of things we do, we literally do not have that time. We have to make time for each other to be able to spend time as a family or as a husband and a wife, a couple. Whereas this gave us the time to do that.
Sure,
but in many
definitely.
instances, it was actually turned into to something else. And I think people missed the point and the plot of it. I think the Almighty was trying to open our eyes to make us say,
I think what we've actually lost, Nafisa, is what you said, is the reconnection comes from communicating. And if we look at how we were living, how much of conversation were we actually having with the people we live with? How much of the broader picture, and instead of just the mundane routine life that we were living and the conversation regarding maybe kids or work or how was your day or weather, now we were in a situation where we were having all this abundance of time surrounded by nothing but openness to speak and share and maybe rediscover, what do we have in common? Let's start playing games together as a family. Let's create habits that we will hopefully, follow through. So that communication was lost along the way of just being busy. And now that we were unbusy, what we tended to do was communicate more. And alhamdulillah, that reconnection was also an eye-opener for a lot of families. So yes, it was challenging. Yes, there were a lot more opportunities to have conflict because there was a lot more communication. But alhamdulillah, I think if people navigated their way through it and said, imperfection does exist, we're not looking for quantity in life, but more quality. And I think when we started doing these little things and putting that in place, there's been a lot of people that have come out of COVID, maybe not more productive, but a lot more happy.
That's so true. And we've got to look at the positives in that as well. It's not just that there have been some negative issues going around, but I think it also made us it taught us the word gratitude. And made us reflect to understand that life is so short. If you look, there's so many people that have contracted it and within a few days were literally gone. So I think what your story teaches us is to be able to look at ourselves and say, look, these are the situations that we're in. The pressure of the commitment with added pressure of financial strain. And trust me, the financial strain, I think at this point in time, is 100-fold worse due to the situation. But it's having how to deal with it is the most, I think, important aspect of it. And that's where I talk about the reconnection as well, is for a family to sit down together and come up with a practical solution that works for everybody, so that there isn't that element of conflict is actually gotten rid of. And I think there's more appreciation in that, because I think then everybody understands each other and appreciates each other more, to say that we're in a situation now, but we're going to get through this together. And I think it also, from your side, I'm sure, created a lot more unity.
No, definitely. But one of my hidden messages in my COVID companion, which was my story that I told, was the situation of privilege. Now, gratitude comes in, of course, we're very thankful for everything we have, But where those children had to actually see their situations of privilege that were granted to them by parents who are now guilting themselves because of financial strain and not being able to provide, we need to sit down as a unit and say, look, what more do we have that we actually need? And that's when all the practice of gratitude and understanding of our real needs as compared to our wants comes in. That carnal desire for humans to constantly chase and, have more and, be more in life. I think that for me was a hidden message of saying, if you stop and if you really just have a look, we have more than enough that we can be happy with,
Shasta, that's a very powerful message because, I always say it's not the presents as in the gifts.
Yeah,
it's the presence as in the presence, the presence that you give. Because a lot of the times, you find parents are present and people are present in the home environment. But the actual listening isn't there. Each one's busy in their own little bubble with something or the other. And I love this hidden message of yours because it makes us think about what is the most important thing in life? What is our essence of life?
Yes.
And our essence of life is exactly what you just spoke about.
And Nafisa, being a teacher now for all these years with the millennials and having my youth programs for confidence building in kids coaching, what I actually find is that whole idea of instant gratification that our children have been born into. And we have to actually teach them to unlearn certain habits. And because of COVID and through COVID, maybe this was the teachable moment for parents to say, this is what you do have and appreciate what you do have instead of constantly just needing and wanting more.
That is so true. And it's also, like you say, it's also teaching ourselves and our kids to compare ourselves to those that have way less than us and having to reach out to them. I think we need to make so much of shukr and gratitude to the Almighty for being able to even just have 3 meals a day.
No, sure, of course. And I think one of the topics I did very lightly touch on was the fact that the kids in the story were on social media. And that is one of the biggest platforms where we actually compare ourselves and compare our situations. And I think this generation in particular have a lot more pressure than us as parents had. And that's why understanding and bridging that gap of teaching them good values and morals is so important right now for us.
Yeah, and I think your story has taught us that, we need to go back to ground level. There's certain things that we learned on ground level that was full of essence in the days of our grandparents and great-grandparents and the things that they did. And those were the things that had a lot more value attached as opposed to a material item. We're not saying don't do anything for your family as such. But I think those little things, I've spoken to one of my guests before and something they said stood out for me was that the little things in life should actually give you joy.
Yes. It was so fascinating that there was a phrase that existed that no longer is being used. The best things in life are free.
You're so right. You couldn't have said that better. And that's what I found so phenomenal about your story. I think it teaches you many lessons and it gives you loads of food for thought. What message do you have for our viewers this afternoon?
I think, if anything, why this Author of the Week interviews are so important is to just get people down to reading. We've got the time and we've got the luxury now of choosing how to spend that time. And I think just going back to literature and basic reading, and it can be any type of reading, because I think we need to introduce this to the next generation. I see it firsthand that people can't emulate their communication well or express themselves well because they don't know how to use their language. And the only way we can learn language is through reading. And
Most
for
definitely.
me, writing as an author was amazing because I've never thought I could do it. And it just shows you limit yourself in your own mental capacities of what you think you can do. But until you go out and actually try it and push yourself and believe that you can, amazing things happen. And alhamdulillah, I'm grateful for the COVID companion and for lockdown behind the mask. And I think from anything that has come out of COVID is we need to look at our growth.
Most definitely. We want to thank you so much for joining us. And growth is the most important thing as well. It allows us to understand our faults and it helps us do better things than we were before. So we want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm actually enticing everybody to go and read this piece and read the anthology, because each one means really something great. Each one has its own
very
messages.
Different. Oh my word, very different.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. We wish you nothing but the best. Take care of yourself, and we look forward to your next story.
Inshallah, you too, and I look forward to speaking to you soon again.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay,
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
That was Sister Shahista Thokan Ismail talking to us about her COVID companion, which she wrote in the anthology, The Authors of Lockdown Behind the Book. Stay with us. We'll be back with Wasim Sarkot after the break.
As winter grips the Northern Hemisphere, refugees, IDPs, and other vulnerable communities are doing all they can to